So as you may know, getting a finance internship, it's pretty difficult, especially in industries like investment banking, private equity, consulting, or basically any type of finance internship. And having gone through the recruiting process myself in these past few months, I could double down and say it's pretty difficult. So I applied to maybe like 200 plus finance internships, and I only converted a handful of offers. In the current economic conditions, they haven't made recruiting any easier. A lot of companies have scaled back on the amount of interns that they're gonna take. So that's made this current recruiting cycle even more harder. And I don't think things are gonna get better anytime soon. So with these 7 recruiting tips that I learned throughout my recruiting process, this will increase the amount of interviews you're gonna get and hopefully converting those to internship offers. And these are tips that I don't really typically hear people talking about either online or on YouTube. So I think these are gonna be completely new that you haven't heard of. And there's things that I didn't even know of having gone through my second recruiting process. So I think it's gonna be worth your time and take you from a regular candidate to an exceptional candidate. So with that, let's get started on the 7 tips that I learned during my recruiting process to help you land your dream internship. So starting off with the first tip, and I think this will really set the foundation for your recruiting process and make it a lot more smoother, and something I wish I would have done, is to really know the industry that you want to break into, whether that's investment banking, consulting, accounting, private equity, etc. And if you don't know what industry that you want to break into, at most, I would say pick 2 industries, because you don't want to stretch yourself thin on applying to a bunch of different internships that you really had to really study for, because these internships have different technical components to their interviews. And as a UC Berkeley student, this is the #1 tip that they tell us during our recruiting process, is to either go for only one industry, but if you don't really know what you want to do, maybe pick 2 industries that you want to recruit for, because ideally a few months before the recruiting process begins, you want to be nailing down these technical interviews, whether that's the case interviews or technicals for investment banking. So this takes a lot of time, and you really want to just nail it down and know what industry you want to break into. And this isn't something I did. I honestly applied to like any finance internship out there. Last summer, I did a finance internship in accounting. I really just wanted to pivot into any other finance internship, but I really wish I had a set plan on what industry I wanted to break into and really double down and practice my interviews for that industry. And for tip number 2, another foundational tip, I think, and it'll really set the tone for your entire recruiting process, is to define your goals of what you want to achieve in your recruiting process. So this might be landing in a certain industry or landing with a dream company. You really want to set this definition of success in your recruiting process so you can have that goal in mind on what you're aiming for. And my recruiting process ended up pretty well, and if you want to know where I'll be interning this summer, you could go ahead and watch the video right here on my recruiting process journey. But towards the end of my recruiting process, I really didn't know when to end recruitment, because even though I landed a handful of internship offers, I really didn't know whether to still keep applying to other companies or just end it there and just be happy with the internship that I got. So setting goals is really important. And going to tip number 3, I'm going to start going into the nitty-gritties on what you could do to improve your chances of getting interviews, which will hopefully lead to internship offers. So tip number 3 is to tailor your resume to each job application that you're applying to. So for myself, having applied to multiple industries in finance, I really didn't tailor my resume in the beginning of my recruiting process. This led to me getting denied by a lot of companies left and right. Early on in my recruiting process, I mass applied to places with the same resume, didn't tailor it, thought that my master resume was just going to be a one-fit-all for each company, but this wasn't the case. I got denied by a lot of places, and towards the second half of my recruiting process, I started looking closely at the description of what these companies are looking for and tailored my resume towards these descriptions. And this made an instant impact. As soon as I started tailoring my resumes, I started getting a lot more traction on getting interviews. So this is something I highly recommend, especially if you're gonna be applying to multiple industries. These companies are looking for different things, especially if you're going one industry to another. And even within the same industry, for consulting, these consulting companies might be looking for different things in their candidates. So taking the time to read the description on what these companies are looking for, what are the requirements for their candidates, really pays off and will lead to more interviews. Okay, moving on to the next tip. It kind of plays off the last one as well for resume tips to increase your chances of getting an interview. So with this tip is to leave your GPA off your resume if it's below a 3.9. So you're probably thinking, oh, I have a 3.8. That's objectively a good GPA. Should I still leave it off? And I would say yes, for this one reason of inherent bias. So say the person that is giving you the interview went to the same school, same major, but they had a 4.0 and you have a 3.8. So because of that, that, they might just have an inherent bias going into the interview that you're a lesser candidate, that, oh, this person got to be in this class, they might not be a good fit for this internship. So you just want to avoid any inherent bias as you can going into an interview by just leaving off your GPA. And I learned this tip from a recruiter from Sony, and honestly, if it didn't come from them, I would have just thought this tip was, bogus. But this came from a person that, they do resume screenings for a living, so it has a lot of merit. And I thought when I left my GPA off my resume, I had a 3.5. I thought people were going to start asking me like, oh, why didn't you list your GPA? I thought it was going to be kind of sus that I did that. Nobody asked me about my GPA. And that's just because people don't really care about your GPA. They care about your past experiences, what technical skills you have. And GPA is just overhyped by schools, honestly. And it really doesn't correlate to landing your dream internship. A person with a 3.5 versus a person with a 4.0, if they both have an interview, they're still on the same level playing field. But I would say, the only place where GPA does matter is to getting that interview, because some places they might have a GPA minimum requirement. So the most important part is meeting that requirement. But other than that, GPA just doesn't matter. And moving on to the fifth tip, this is more geared to when you already have an interview set. So this is to market yourself as the ideal and best candidate. So how do you market yourself as the best candidate? So starting off, you have to read the job description. What are they looking for in an applicant? And with the job description, you'll know what they're looking for. Minimum requirements, what technical skills. Are they just looking for someone that's passionate about the role? And then moving on from there, start researching the company. Start learning, past transactions that they passed did. What are their values? And then going off that, start shaping stories from your past experiences to answer questions that might come up about these technical skills that you might use in the past experiences about leadership, working in teams, etc. These are pretty common questions that you might get, and it's really important to nail down stories around these common questions. And the reality of things, these big companies especially, half the time, they're just looking for someone that's passionate for the job, someone that has a lot of enthusiasm, someone that's going to bring a lot of energy to this role for the summer. Half the time they're looking for that. So if you don't have all the technical skills that they're looking for, try to compensate by being really passionate about the role. Or if you have something that really stands out from other candidates, share that. Like for myself personally, when I was going through interviews, I mentioned my YouTube, and this is something that I think helped me throughout my recruiting process. So just try to find ways to expose your strengths and try to present yourself as the best candidate. So going on to the sixth tip, only two more left, stick with me, is to network for your dream company that you want to work for. So I thought going in, networking is just not necessary. I thought you could work around networking with just mass applications. But when it comes down to things, if you set your goals on what company that you want to work for, you really have to work hard and network for that company. You don't have to do it for every company, but just for the ones that you really want to work for, networking really pays off. And this is not something that I realized midway through my recruiting process. And I didn't really do networking, honestly, throughout my recruiting process, and it worked fine for me. But say if you want to do investment banking, networking is really important, because my roommate, he's going to work for Goldman Sachs for investment banking, and he was able to network his way all the way to a super day. So that just goes to show the power of networking, and just setting up coffee chats and getting to know these associates really pays dividends when you're applying for their company's internship, because it makes recruiting a lot easier when you have a referral. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my attempted networking ended up in dead ends. So it's important to first start off with alumni or people that were in similar clubs as you. And if you don't go to a target school that have a lot of alumni at that company from your school, just send out a lot of cold emails or a lot of LinkedIn messages, and hopefully one of them will reply. But don't neglect networking throughout your recruiting process. It's a very powerful tool, and it'll make the recruiting process a lot easier. And it's probably the most important tip to landing your dream internship. And with the last tip, so this is what I learned at the end of my recruiting process from all the ups and downs that I went through. And it's that the recruitment process is really a lottery. So in the beginning of my recruitment process, I was just getting denied left and right. And it really discouraged me. I thought I was not gonna get an internship offer for the summer. And there was a lot of times where I was feeling down, but you really had to just keep going. And at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. You have to mass apply to these places. You have to prepare as much as you can. You have to do resume tailors consistently. And by doing all these helpful tips, it'll increase your chances. But at the end of the day, it is a lottery. You don't know what company's gonna accept you or which company is going to deny you. So you just have to keep on going, keep applying to all these companies, keep stalking LinkedIn. That's what I did throughout my recruiting process every day, just looking for new job applications out there, and just keep going and stay optimistic. And with that wraps up the 7 tips that I learned throughout my recruiting process. And if you thought any of these tips were helpful, consider subscribing or like the video. But with that concludes my video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.